someone knocked on the door. A teenage girl opened the door and saw a delivery man standing there. She told him that her parents were not home and asked him to come back or call her later. The delivery man returned later, but this time things did not end so happily. The house was home to the Stay family. The head of the family was 39-year-old Stephen, his wife, 33-year-old Katie, and their 5 children, 15-year-old Cassidy, 13-year-old Brian, 9-year-old Emily, 7-year-old Rebecca, and 4-year-old Zach. The family was very friendly and happy, famous among the neighbors for their Christmas parties and Halloween celebrations. The Stay family lived in an affluent neighborhood in the city of Houston, Texas. It was quiet, comfortable, and safe. Stephen had worked in real estate for many years and had recently opened his own small agency. Kathy was a homemaker, dedicating all her time to her children and household chores. She was always supportive of her husband. This particular day, July 9, 2014, began with the family visiting their grandmother. After returning home, the parents went to the bank while the eldest daughter, Cassidy, was left to care for her younger siblings. Someone knocked at the door. The girl opened the door and saw a deliveryman standing in front of her with a package in his hands. She said her parents weren't home. Cassidy didn't get a good look at the courier's face, asked her to come over or call back later, and closed the door. The courier returned after a while. The girl opened the door and said that her parents were not home yet. At that moment, she looked closer at his face and realized who was standing in front of her. It was 33-year-old Ronald Lee Husky, her Aunt Melanie's ex-husband. When Ronald realized that Cassidy recognized him, he said he wanted to see Melanie. The girl answered that she wasn't home. Cassidy got worried and started to close the door, but that infuriated Ronald. He kicked the door with all his might, knocking the girl to the floor. The man burst into the house and pulled out a gun. It turned out that instead of a package, he had a rolled-up blanket in the bag, which he intended to use as a silencer. The children were terrified. They hugged and held each other, begging the man to leave, but he did not. Ronald held them hostage while he waited for their parents. When Stephen and Katie arrived from the bank and entered the house, Ronald pointed a gun at them and threatened them, demanding to know Melanie's whereabouts. They refused to talk. Stephen and Katie knew that Ronald was an abusive man, which was why Melanie had divorced him and was now hiding from him. Ronald took their cell phones and ordered them to lie face down on the floor. Katie realized what he was up to, jumped up and screamed, "No." Then he shot her in the face and began shooting each member of the family as they lay on the floor, not even sparing the children. He shot 4-year-old Zach in the shoulder, and the boy jumped up and ran to his father, who had already been shot. Ronald walked up to him and callously shot him in the head. When it was Cassidy's turn, the bullet miraculously bounced off her head, but the perpetrator didn't notice. The girl, seeing what had happened to her brother, lay still. Ronald thought they were all dead and left. He took the keys to the Honda parked in front of the house and drove away in the family car. After leaving, Cassidy called 911. A teenage girl told her that Ronald Husky had shot her entire family and that everyone was dead except her and her brother. She could hear him gasping. Police and paramedics arrived on the scene and found a gruesome scene in the house. 6 people lying on the floor with their hands on the backs of their heads in a huge pool of blood. All 6 showed no signs of life. Cassidy was the only survivor. She sustained a minor head injury. She received the necessary treatment and made a full recovery. The girl went to live with her maternal grandparents, and Ronald could not reveal all the details of the horrific murder. The girl told the police that the killer was stalking her aunt and disturbing the whole family. He threatened her. She assumed that Ronald had gone to her grandparents' house, where Melanie, who he was looking for, lived. It turned out that Ronald had fled the scene in the family's Honda, and the vehicle was wanted. It was urgent to find the dangerous criminal before he hurt anyone else. The officers headed to Melanie's house and spotted the Honda on the way. They blocked Ronald's driveway and he pulled over, but the man refused to get out of the car and pointed a gun at himself. The perpetrator was surrounded by 50 police officers with guns in their hands. They demanded that he get out of the car. In response, Ronald said he had a problem with his head. He demanded to speak to his brother, who lived in California, and said he didn't want to go to jail. Negotiations with him lasted 3 hours before Ronald finally got out of the car. The killer was arrested and charged with capital murder. He was held without bail. After being released from the hospital, Cassie, her grandfather, and her uncles attended an event to honor her family's memory. It was decided to release 600 colorful balloons into the sky. Cassidy quoted one of her favorite Harry Potter books. "Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, as long as you remember to turn on the light. I know that my mom and dad, Brian, Emily, Bika, and Zach, are in a better world, and one day I will be able to see them again." The girl also said that she would stay strong. Police officers began looking into information about the perpetrator. It turned out that Ronald had several domestic violence charges filed against him by his ex-wife. Ronald and Melanie were married in 2002 in California. They had known each other since elementary school. The couple left their hometown and settled in the state of Utah. He intentionally moved his wife away from his family to isolate her from her family. The problems began almost immediately after the marriage. He brainwashed her into believing that Melanie was of no use to anyone, not even her family. Ronald physically, sexually, and morally abused his wife. The marriage produced 4 children. He continued to beat his wife when she was pregnant, and then he began to beat the children. Ronald earned little money as a courier, and there was not enough money for their large family. He did not allow his wife to work or even leave the house, so Melanie had no one to complain to. But one day in 2008, Melanie got lucky and was able to call the police. Ronald accidentally left his phone unattended, and after another beating, Melanie grabbed the phone and called the police. Melanie was taken to the hospital. Ronald was sentenced to 8 months probation, but that didn't stop him, and when his wife returned home, the beatings resumed. Ronald became even more enraged by his wife's actions and threatened to kill her family if she ever claimed him again. Melanie was terrified and complied. In 2013, Melanie's patience ran out. She and her children ran away from home while Ronald was at work and moved into a shelter. She filed for divorce and a restraining order, which she soon obtained. Melanie contacted her sister, Kathy, and asked for her help. Kathy and Melanie had previously been very close, and Kathy could not leave her sister in need. She took Melanie and her 4 children away from her abusive husband to her parents in Houston, Texas. There they were safe. Melanie and Ronald's divorce was finalized on February 14, 2014. The parents were awarded joint custody of the children, with Melanie getting primary custody and Ronald having to pay her $700 a month in child support from his small salary. Ronald went to live with his parents in California and was forbidden to go near Melanie and her family or the school. The man had to undergo a psychological evaluation to determine if he was emotionally stable and could socialize with the children, but he never passed. While living in his parents' home, Ronald began to take out his aggression on them, beating his elderly parents, his older sister, and anyone he knew who tried to get close to him. One day, after learning that his mother was talking to Melanie, he attacked her, tied her to a chair, choked her unconscious, and then left. His sister discovered his mother and called the police, but Ronald got away with it and continued to abuse his family. His sister got a restraining order against him and moved out of the house, and Ronald's family could not understand why and with whom he was so violent. He grew up in a loving and caring family, was a popular high school football player, prom king, and had many boyfriends and girlfriends. Ronald was never abused or bullied. No one could believe that the outgoing, fun-loving Ronnie would turn into a murderous monster. And then he decided to get revenge on his ex-wife, went after her, but instead killed her sister's family. Turns out Ronald didn't have a registered gun on him. He stole it from his ex-girlfriend. He bought over 200 rounds of ammunition from a gun store. Ballistics tests showed that the gun found on him matched the shell casings found near the bodies of the murdered family. Murder plans were found in his notebook. He had originally planned to kill his ex-wife, her parents, and his sister Melanie's family in revenge. It became apparent that the crime was not spontaneous. Ronald had originally planned this horrific crime and wanted to take the lives of many people. If Cassidy had not called 911 immediately, and the police had not stopped him, he would have killed Melanie, her parents, and many others. A memorial was set up in front of the dead family's home, and neighbors and loved ones, not indifferent to the tragedy, went to the house and carried flowers. Melanie felt guilty for her ex-husband's actions and did not understand why he killed her sister and her family and not her. Because of the hurricane, the courthouse was badly damaged and the trial was delayed. It wasn't until August 25, 2019 that it finally began. Ronald was facing the death penalty, and the prosecutor decided to seek that punishment. During the trial, the defendant fainted and had to be placed in a wheelchair. The defense attorney stated that the defendant was frightened and needed a mental evaluation. A psychiatric evaluation revealed that he had been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The psychiatrist was convinced that he was faking mental illness to avoid responsibility for his horrific act. He had previously been diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder. While living with his parents, Ronald had tried to get even 3 times, but was unsuccessful. Ronald admitted that he killed his family, but claimed that the voices in his head told him to do it and promised to bring his family back. That's why he did it, even though he didn't know what he was doing. The prosecution presented surveillance footage of the places Ronald visited before the murder: hotel, store, movie theater, showing that he appeared completely calm and rational. He did not appear to be insane. The defendant's brother testified that Ronald was very angry with Kathy for helping Melanie and the children escape and wanted revenge on her. Ronald's ex-wife, Melanie, confirmed that he had been stalking her, threatening to kill the entire family, and notes in a notebook confirmed that he had been planning all of this for months. There was no doubt that this was not a case of sudden insanity. 19-year-old Cassidy was the key witness and testified against Ronald. She had grown up considerably, was a student at Brigham Young University in Utah, and was already engaged to her boyfriend. The girl described all the horrors she had experienced in the house, the moment of the murder, and was amazed that Ronald did not even show remorse for what he had done. In the 5 years he had spent behind bars awaiting trial, he had not thought about the crime or felt any regret. Ronald was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He is currently on death row awaiting execution. If you appreciate my efforts, don't forget to like this video. I will be happy to exchange opinions about this story in the comments. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your attention and see you soon.